I thought I'd just talk today, when I was in my late teens and early 20s, one of the people that inspired me the most, one of my kind of spiritual people I read about the most, was Mother Teresa. And the way she sort of went out into the streets of Calcutta, she found people who were lying on the streets or whatever, and she took them into her home, and she nursed them and she cared for them, she gave them dignity, she showed them love, sometimes dignity in their death. I found an incredibly inspiring sort of expression of Christianity, and the way she expressed it, she said actually it's through doing this, she articulated actually when we reach out to these people, we are reaching out to Christ himself, we are serving and touching the very wounds of Christ himself. And that for me at that time was a very new sort of spiritual paradox that I'd never fully appreciated or come across before. As I said, a highly inspiring one. When she came to the West, Mother Teresa, she found it at first difficult. She felt lost. She couldn't quite see the need. Then after a while, she said this. She said, the greatest disease in the West today is being unwanted, unloved, and uncared for. The hunger for love is more difficult to remove than the hunger for bread. 3 years ago, a few of us were just beginning to have a conversation, myself and David and Gavin and Cecil and Yvonne, about how can we replicate that, how can we get people out from churches in a meaningful way, engaging with those who we feel could do with love. And so what we do now is we go out, we try and find people that need a home, and by the way, all of us are just a divorce, a redundancy or a breakdown away from being homeless. And some people have got there through different paths. We have found people walking the streets, we have found people sleeping on the streets, but others have come through other paths, and but they've all needed a home in one way or shape or another. Once they're in the home, that's, if you like, when we can try to offer the men and the women in our houses a non-judgmental, non-patronising love. And it's once they're in that house as well, we're not a charity that gives to, we're a charity that then says, okay, you're in the house now, we're here to journey with you. And through that journey we often find, or we discover the things that keep them down. And actually those are the things that might oppress them. It may be a whole raft of things, you've all heard it before, be that abuse or a feeling of unlovedness, maybe addictions, maybe past crimes, whatever it may be. And that's what oppresses them, and that's what with them we try over time to work with, so they can lever themselves out of those situations. And also we're able, through doing that, to tell the people why we want to do this. We want to do this because also in our lives this relationship with the Lord has given us enormous strength and encouragement here on earth, and that's what we want to impart in you, because we believe that's going to make you better here on this earth as well. And so that really is our approach. We want to care about the whole area of people's lives, their immediate needs, the things that keep them down, and their spiritual needs. And you won't find many charities in this city that articulate their outreach in those terms. You won't find many actually in this country who are working at scale, who can articulate their mission or their outreach in those three terms. Jesus articulated his mission as this: I've come to preach the good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to release the oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favour. And our heart is to try and replicate that, to try and understand what that means for us here in Peterborough. And by the way, we don't always get it right. We're a long way from being perfect. We make loads and loads of mistakes, of course. But what we try and make our heart to be is to replicate that sense of mission that is completely holistic. And the way we do it, in short, is by trying to provide love. Again, Mother Teresa, the only cure for loneliness, despair and hopelessness is love. And by the way, if you're going to love someone, you have to make yourself vulnerable, which means you might end up being hurt, upset or disappointed. We love anyway, and that is also part of our story. Ours is not just a glamorous story of people getting sorted overnight. It's far from it. Ours is a journey with people, and sometimes we find ourselves serving the suffering Christ as much as the kind of risen Christ. But we also, through that, do have stories we can tell, stories of people breaking through. Philippe there is a wonderful story. He refers to someone from his church as a father figure he never had. He's now completely free from addictions. and I speak to him regularly. Not only when I spoke to him the last few weeks, he said to me, look, I feel totally free now. He also speaks to me about his faith as well. He says, I want to find more of God. And that's our dream for everyone, really. It doesn't happen every time, and we can't control that, but that's what we want to try to be and try to do. So 3 years ago, we'd not opened our first house. Our first house was then opened here at Brethren Baptist. We now will shortly have our 10th house in Peterborough. That's 10 churches in Peterborough. The churches will be offering, so now in this city, the churches are offering or will be offering more beds than the average hostel in this city. We're doing it at 1/3 of the cost without any government funding and with outcomes that are comparable to any, I would say, going around. In addition to Peterborough, we have a house in Cambridge, Nottingham, Norwich, working with girls coming out, or ladies coming out of rehab, and supporting a church in Swindon that's got 2 houses. So that's 14 houses and churches in total we're working with. Why can't we repeat what we've done in Peterborough and other cities, is our view. And that's what we're trying to do. So in total tonight, 31 tenants will be sleeping in a house supported by Hope Into Action. That's not bad, but also I can tell you there's a tiny fraction of the need out there. We started in the middle of a recession which bankrupted some charities, some of which were heavily reliant on government. Well, without single money from the government to help with our running costs, we have enough money in the bank and more committed. Just in January this year, we had a grant running out for my salary. Someone phoned up, no idea they were going to phone up, hadn't thought of them at all. Said, Ed, we've met, we'd like to pay 15 grand towards your salary for the next 3 years. And just wonderful stories of God's provision. I don't assume it will always be this way, but I do believe in a God that is bigger than any government or any recession. We want to thank everyone here who has supported Hope Into Action. When Jesus spoke about money in the parable of the talents, he immediately followed it with a talk on values in Matthew 25, where he talked about when you visit someone in prison, then you are visiting me. He linked money and values. Since 2008, many in this country have been discussing the relationship between money and values. I've attended conferences looking at how capital can be used for social ends. I've often gone along as a Christian, and I've often been in a very secular environment and often felt actually quite lonely as a Christian in these settings. We put our money in banks, pensions, stocks or shares, then with nothing wrong in that, but we are actually sharing our wealth with the rich. Most stockbrokers and bankers I know earn more than the average wage. Acts 2 and 4, I'm not saying that there is nothing wrong in that. Acts 2 and 4 does talk about people sharing all they have. How does that work for us here in Peterborough? In this room alone probably stands hundreds of thousands of pounds. Across this city, there's millions of pounds worth of Christian wealth. Across this country, there's billions of pounds worth of Christian wealth. In the last 3 years, roughly 1.5 million of that wealth has been invested in houses for the homeless. Money that would have otherwise gone into banks or something like that. Wouldn't it be great to think that in 20 years' time, people with an understanding, a practical and theological understanding of this concept of sharing, are actually, we've got Christians and churches leading the way in investing and coming up with great ideas. Not just investing in houses for homeless, that's one idea that we've got and it's a great idea. But other ways that we can use that money more directly for kingdom money. Just imagine then what Almighty God could do. So I've spoken a bit about our outreach, I've spoken a bit about how we use investments and our sort of thinking about sharing. I want to just talk a little bit now about the church. Some of you know I'm married. I've been married for 9 years now. In those 9 years, once or twice I've met 1 or 2 tiny, tiny blemishes in my wife. That's what I would say. Now, if someone ever came to me and said, do you know what, and had sort of slagged off my wife, that would be it for me. You know, I would actually react to that, and my instant reaction would be I'd want them to have a pretty swift discussion with my fist. You know, that's how you react when someone slags off someone you care about. And that's actually how Jesus views his church. He tells us that in Ephesians 5. He views it as a radiant church without blemish. And one of the great things with my job is, our job is that we do actually go and visit a number of churches around the city. And individually and collectively, they are a radiant sight. They are eclectic, bizarre, wonderful, glorious, full of potential, people passionate about the Lord and so many other things. And we can be really proud of the church. And actually tomorrow I'm meeting someone from the council. But part of my job is to boast about how much the church has done. And we want to see the church right at the forefront of leading. When people associate, say, homelessness, in our case, we want to get people to think about what a good job the church is doing. And lots of people are saying this. We've been saying it for 3 years, but now is the moment, by the way, for the church to step up with government cutting more and more services, with the need rising. We are uniquely poised to sort of step into that gap. So I've spoken a bit about what we are. I just want to end now on two prayers. One, please, if you're going to pray for Hope into Action, there's a temptation with organisations, as you get bigger, you get more policies, more processes, more procedures, you get better at what you do. And God becomes part of your history. And actually you block him up and you contain him and you say a prayer every morning. Actually, he's someone that moved in 2011 when you started up. Well, actually, we want God. Please pray for us that we never contain God in the lives of our tenants, in our thinking, in our faith, in what he could do. Because it's so tempting to just keep it into what you can manage. And it's anxious-making not to. But please pray that we would never, never contain God. That's the first thing I'd love you to pray for. We're going to go into time of session. The second thing I just want to love you to pray for and talk about is this sense of anger. I sometimes say Hope into Action in part was birthed out of anger that was born out of love. People have heard me talk about when I met an ex-offender on the streets. He had nowhere to go. No one would take him in this city in 2008. Well, now we've got 10 churches who have said we're up for the challenge for housing these guys, and we're up for the challenge of discipling and loving them. But it was birthed out of a sense of anger and a desire to see change, a desire to see churches engaged in these situations. Over time, that anger has actually changed a little bit, because as we work with these tenants on a day-to-day basis, you see the temptations and the struggles and the pitfalls and just the tragedies and the fact that life sucks for them. And at times you just get a tiny glimpse that actually there is, just as Jesus went into the wilderness and was tempted by the devil, and just as Jesus said, look, Satan's asked to sift you as wheat, you get a tiny sense of spiritual battle raging around these lives. And that also makes you kind of angry. But I've been in prayer meetings with people in this room, and I've sensed the passion and the fervour. And if there is a God, and I believe there is, then if nothing else, Hope into Action's prayers have made a difference in these guys' lives and girls' lives. And I do believe that.